You know that feeling? When someone you care about is really hurting, going through a significant loss, and you try to comfort them,
Yeah.
you look for the right words, something, anything to bring a bit of peace. But, well, so often what comes out just feels flat.
Or worse, yeah,
Yeah,
like you've made them feel totally misunderstood. And
exactly.
that gap, between our intention we want to soothe and how our words actually land when someone's grieving, it's a, it's a really fascinating and very human puzzle.
It really is.
So today we're doing a deep dive into why those seemingly kind phrases can just land so awkwardly.
Mm,
We'll be looking at some really thought-provoking ideas
okay.
about the psychology of grief and, the ways our society kind of fumbles when faced with loss.
Right.
The goal here is to figure out why these common attempts at comfort can backfire and maybe explore what's really going on sort of beneath the surface of these interactions.
Okay, let's get into it then. One of the ideas that really jumped out from the sources we looked at is this concept of the second half of the sentence. It's like these words, they seem gentle, but they often carry this unspoken, sometimes quite dismissive implication, like they're in a better place now.
Right. Classic example.
On the surface, it's meant to offer solace, right? A sense of peace. But that unsaid part lurking underneath is often something like, oh, so you should find comfort in that and, stop feeling so bad.
That's a key insight, absolutely. Or think about, at least now you get to know what's really important in life.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
It might reflect a truth that can emerge later, but the unspoken bit feels like, so focus on that silver lining
Mm,
and get past your sadness.
mm.
Or this will make you a better person in the end, which sort of subtly implies, so your current pain serves a purpose, just accept it and move on.
It's dismissive.
Even something that sounds reassuring, like you won't always feel this bad, can carry that hidden weight of, so you shouldn't be feeling it quite so intensely right now.
Yeah, it's almost like we're trying to rush their process, isn't it? Trying to bypass the actual pain that needs to happen.
It's
Some other phrases that really show this: you're stronger than you think. The implied part being, so you should be coping better than this.
right, or this is all part of the plan.
Implying, so there's no room for your questions or your deep sadness. And that big one, everything happens for a reason, we'll definitely circle back to that one.
Oh, yeah.
It often whispers, so find the meaning and get over it. Even things like, he wouldn't want you to be sad can feel like a burden, like, so your grief is somehow betraying their memory.
Mm-hmm. And it even extends to how we frame the loss itself.
Mm-hmm.
At least you had her for as long as you did.
Oof, yeah.
The underlying message can easily feel like, so be grateful for the past and stop dwelling on the loss now, or he died doing something he loved.
Trying to find a positive spin.
Yeah, implying, so there's a good side to this tragedy, your grief should be lessened by that. And even the incredibly jarring, you can always have another child.
Oh, that's rough.
It just carries that awful dismissal.
Yeah.
So this particular loss isn't really that significant.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How our own discomfort with intense negative emotion, like grief, might be driving this urge to find a quick fix or a positive angle.
That unspoken slawlish. So stop feeling so bad.
Yeah,
So revealing, isn't
it
it?
really is.
Because often what someone grieving needs most is just acknowledgement.
Yeah.
For their current reality, their pain, to be validated without judgment, without that push to heal faster.
Exactly.
And when we accidentally add that dismissive second half, we're basically saying, your feelings are making me uncomfortable and you should be feeling differently.
Precisely. True comfort isn't about trying to fix or erase the pain. It can't be erased.
No.
It's about acknowledging it's real, allowing it to exist without pressure to, shrink or vanish. These well-meant but invalidating second halves really block that crucial acknowledgement.
Okay, so that's one big piece. Now, another really interesting dynamic the sources explore is this tendency. When someone's grieving, many of us jump in to share our own stories of loss. Ah, yes. The hey, me too
God,
impulse.
it feels like a natural human thing to do, doesn't it? To connect through shared experience, to say,
Yeah.
hey, I get it. You're not alone in this.
Absolutely. The motivation is often empathy, a
Hmm.
genuine desire to bridge that gap of understanding by saying, I've been through something sort of similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, what the sources highlight is that this often feels quite different to the person who's right in the thick of fresh grief.
How so?
Well, it can unintentionally make them feel like their unique loss is being overshadowed
Yeah.
or compared to something else, or even minimized by the other person's story.
Okay.
The source gave that stark example comparing the death of a spouse to the death of a pet. however much you love that pet.
Right. It's just not the same scale of loss.
Exactly. It underscores the vastly different landscapes of these losses, and way those kinds of comparisons can feel so jarring, so unhelpful in that immediate moment.
It's almost like sharing our own story, even though we mean to connect, can accidentally shift the spotlight away. The source mentioned this idea of a portal opening up, where people feel this sudden urge to unload their own backlogs of unheard and unspoken grief.
That's a really interesting phrase, backlogs of grief.
Yeah. And look, those feelings are completely valid. They deserve their own time and space. But maybe right when someone else is dealing with a huge, fresh loss isn't that moment.
That's a really insightful way to put it. We all carry these histories of loss, don't we? Big ones, small ones.
Sure.
And because our culture often doesn't give us great spaces to really process them, those emotions can sit there unresolved.
Right.
So seeing someone else's acute grief can absolutely trigger those stored up feelings. But like you said, in that initial period, the focus really needs to stay squarely on the person navigating their immediate pain.
Yeah.
What's interesting there is maybe the underlying need for validation in the person sharing their story, even if it's kind of misdirected in that specific moment.
And this, unfortunately, can sometimes lead to what one source called the competition of grief.
The Grief Olympics.
Yeah, exactly. That unintentional and often really unwelcome comparison. Whose pain is bigger, whose loss is worse.
And what's particularly revealing is the kind of defensive reaction that can happen. When the grieving person maybe gently points out that, different kinds of losses have different impacts, the person who shared their story might suddenly feel like their pain is being dismissed now.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Like your experience wasn't bad enough or something. It just shows how delicate and, frankly, sometimes fraught these conversations about grief can be.
The source material does try to tackle this idea of a hierarchy of grief, though.
It does, and carefully.
It acknowledges that, okay, yes, all loss is valid, all grief deserves acknowledgement, but not all losses carry the same, life-altering weight.
Exactly. The loss of a grandparent, which is deeply sad, of course, is generally a different kind of experience with different long-term ripples than, say, the loss of a child.
Right. Or the end of a marriage, difficult as that is, usually differs in its total impact from the death of a partner.
Precisely. You can't just flatten the landscape of grief and say every loss has the exact same magnitude, the same consequences immediately and down the line.
Yeah.
The source used a powerful analogy, maybe a bit extreme, but comparing stubbing your toe to a catastrophic injury.
Okay.
Both cause pain, definitely.
Yeah.
But the scale, the impact on your life going forward, dramatically different.
But the crucial point here, and the sources stress this, isn't about ranking grief. It's not about setting up some kind of pain leaderboard.
No, absolutely not.
It's about recognizing that while, yes, distinctions in impact exist, making direct comparisons between individual losses is just unhelpful, often hurtful.
Right.
It doesn't lessen anyone's pain, and it can leave the person grieving feeling really unheard, invalidated. The bottom line should be honoring all experiences of grief without comparing them.
Well said. Which brings us back to those platitudes, those seemingly harmless phrases that can be so problematic.
Yeah.
And maybe the one that gets the strongest negative reaction. Everything happens for a reason.
Ugh. Yes. Why does that one, which sounds maybe comforting on the surface, often provoke such intense frustration, sometimes even rage?
Well, if we circle back to that idea of the unspoken second half,
Okay.
everything happens for a reason can imply, maybe subconsciously, that the person grieving somehow needed this awful experience, or that their life before was somehow incomplete or lacking until this tragedy struck.
Ah, I see. So it subtly suggests loss is the only way to grow or learn something important.
Exactly, and that's profoundly invalidating, isn't it?
Totally.
It diminishes the value of the person's life and their loved one's life as it was before the loss. It suggests some kind of cosmic trade-off required this pain.
Yeah.
The source points out these kinds of statements can feel deeply insulting, even if the grieving person can't quite put their finger on why they feel so affronted by it.
It's almost like saying their loved one had to die just so they could become a better person or learn a lesson.
Yes. It strips away the agency, the inherent worth of the person who was lost. And it puts this incredibly heavy burden of forced personal growth onto the bereaved.
Right. It just negates the reality of their love, the huge absence they're now facing.
The source material touches on post-traumatic growth, that concept, and shares a really fascinating perspective from a therapist who worked with veterans. What they noticed was that the individuals who did find some positive growth after trauma
Yeah.
were often those who felt a significant lack of fulfillment or connection in their lives before the event happened.
Oh, interesting.
They weren't grateful for the trauma itself, obviously not, but they saw their later development partly in the context of that previous dissatisfaction.
Okay.
But for people whose lives already felt rich and meaningful before the loss, that narrative of forced growth often just doesn't resonate. There wasn't that same kind of pre-existing void, perhaps.
That makes a lot of sense. It really highlights that grief isn't some kind of, I don't know, cosmic self-improvement program.
Exactly. The path forward is more about integration, right? Finding a way to carry the loss with you, not about being forced into some supposedly better version of yourself because of it.
Yeah.
Attributing a predetermined meaning or forced growth onto someone's devastating loss,
Yeah.
it really diminishes their personal journey. It can feel deeply disrespectful to the raw pain they're going through.
So when you pull all these threads together, the awkward phrases, the comparisons, the platitudes, what's the common theme?
Ultimately, what all these observations seem to point to is a fundamental way our culture, particularly Western culture, often approaches grief
Which is,
as a problem to be solved, an illness to cure, or, something to be overcome and moved past as quickly as humanly possible.
okay. That problem-solving mentality.
Mm.
That seems like the root cause, maybe.
No,
The underlying reason why so many well-intentioned attempts at comfort just miss the mark.
I think that's a huge part of it, yeah. We're so focused on trying to alleviate the pain to find a solution, maybe because we're uncomfortable, that we fail to simply acknowledge its existence and just be present with the person who's experiencing it.
Yeah.
Grief isn't really a problem that needs fixing. It's a deeply human and natural response to significant loss.
Mm-hmm.
It's an experience that needs to be lived through, not a puzzle to solve or a hurdle to just get over.
And if you, listening to this, have ever felt that disconnect, that sense of being misunderstood or even feeling, I don't know, crazy or too sensitive when someone's well-meaning words didn't feel comforting,
Yeah,
hopefully this deep dive sheds some light on why that might be happening. You're not alone in feeling that.
definitely not.
So the main takeaway here seems to be that words of comfort often fail. Not usually because of bad intentions,
Right. The intention is usually good.
but because they often try to erase the pain or solve the unsolvable problem of grief instead of just acknowledging and validating the very real, often overwhelming experience of loss.
Exactly. Maybe take a moment, reflect on your own experiences. Both times you've tried to comfort someone,
Mhm.
and times maybe you've been on the receiving end of comfort attempts. What words or actions actually resonated? What felt even unintentionally dismissive?
That's a good exercise. And maybe here's a final thought for you to chew on. If our instinct so often is to try and fix pain in ourselves and others, what might it actually look like?
Hmm.
And what kind of comfort might it offer to simply be present with that pain without judging it, without needing to make it disappear?
Yeah. What might we learn and what might we offer? But just being there.